morning to all our viewers. Welcome back to the third session of this webinar series that Keiyamangalam University has initiated with distinguished academicians, scholars, and industry leaders. For those of you who are joining us from outside Keiyamangalam University, my name is Aditya Malik, and I am the Vice Chancellor of Keiyamangalam University. It's a great honor and privilege and delight for me today to introduce our speaker today, Professor Krishan Lal. Professor Krishan Lal has had a very long and very distinguished career, and we are very privileged to have him as one of our faculty members. I'd read out a few of his achievements and recognitions that Professor Krishan Lal ji has received during his long and distinguished career. First of all, he is the C.V. Raman Chair in Physics at Keiyamangalam University. He has been the Director of the National Physical Lab, a Fellow of the Indian National Academy. He's a foreign member of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and currently is also the co-chair of 140 National Science Academies. This is a recognition that has not been achieved by any person from this country, from India, so far. Congratulations, sir. He is the president of the Indian National Science Academy, INSA, the editor of Zeitschrift für Kristallographie in Germany. He has received an honorary doctorate from the Russian Science Academy of Sciences, an honorary professor from IIT Kanpur, honorary professor for life, Delhi University, IBM fellow, visiting professor at the University of Tokyo, and several other accolades and recognitions in his distinguished career. We are indeed privileged to have him as part of our faculty at Keiyamangalam University. Professor Krishan Lal has published over 100 research papers in peer-reviewed journals, 9 edited volumes, and has 7 patents. His area of research is in solid-state physics, materials characteristics, crystal growth and lattice imperfections, high-resolution X-ray diffraction. Today, Professor Krishan Lal will be talking to all of us about recent advances in measurement sciences and its multifaceted applications. As always, there will be time at the end of Professor Krishan Lal's talk for you to ask questions. Please type in your questions at the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. I would like to now hand the webinar over to Professor Krishan Lal to enlighten us on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Malik, for this nice introduction. It's a pleasure to speak about measurement science, with which I've been associated for a very long time. Also, as mentioned, I was director of the National Physical Laboratory, where even now I have an association. Measurements in our life are very prevalent, whether we are a scientist, common person, we are having any profession, you can't escape measurement. And this has been so from times immemorial. Even in India, for example, if you look at several texts like the Chanakya time or in Mahabharata, in others, there is always something on measurements. And particularly in Ayurveda, most texts start with telling what is the weights and how to define. So leaving aside this, the modern time starts with the technical or the industrial revolution starting in Europe and then spreading worldwide. So they realized that if you don't streamline the measurement system, there will be problem in development of science, there will be problem in trade, there will be problem in also economic matters of various types. So to give you an example, we all in India, for length, we say 1 foot, and still in colloquial language, we say futta, or little bit more learned people will say foot ruler. So most people don't realize that at one time in Britain, the ruler, the king's foot was the measure of 1 foot. There was no standard scientific matter. It is the French who understood that we should have something which is not changeable, which is not variable, which doesn't depend upon persons, So they took the diameter of the Earth. They took actually one quadrant of the Earth from Barcelona in Spain and Dunkirk in Paris and divided it by 10,000 times and called it roughly 1 meter. It is not the same as. So this was necessary because people felt you can't have trade. Even in India at the time of independence, the measures were different in different states, some 500 measures. If you buy grain or gold or anything, it varied from place to place. So the international efforts were made to create about 125 years ago a system where same measures will be accepted whosoever joins that treaty. There was a treaty of merit. It is a treaty of meter, which is actually signed by the governments. And India, after independence, became its member. We were at number 57. We got also all the artifacts. Now, this treaty defined a meter which was slightly less than the meter realized by or proposed by the French scientists. And they made a rod of platinum iridium which will not bend. It was structure was such, and put two bars, and the length between this was defined 1 meter. And similarly, 1 kilogram was a mass of platinum iridium which will remain stable. I will show you a picture also. And this Mr. 1 kilogram was found not very stable till recently. Every year it will put on some weight like human being, some few milligrams. So the weight was very small. So all meters, kilograms travel to Paris. There is a BIP, International Bureau of Standards, with the help coordinating all these things. And even on lighter tone, this kilogram would get a special seat in the aeroplane. So the person carrying it will have a adjoining seat where Mr. Kilogram will say, have a bath and have a new value. But this worry was that whether you can only do mass and length, then came time. Time is still the most accurately measured parameter. Then mass, length, time. Then we wanted light, intensity, electric current. Now, like this, we have 7 base units. The question was, many of them were very arbitrarily defined, like this artifact. Now, as an anecdote, I can say in the National Physical Laboratory, which is custodian of Indian national standards, when a new director is appointed, he takes charge of the kilogram and the meter, and the outgoing director gives it to him. But this meant that people have to take a lot of effort. So one of the things, when in the 80s, it was decided meter can be defined, we can also define in terms of velocity of light. Velocity of light is sacrosanct, as I have been also telling at KRMU, 299792458 meters per second. This 9 digit is accepted globally, and you can define a meter in terms of. Since then, efforts were made that all units must be defined in terms of fundamental constant. Constants are invariants. So this was one of the things which took quite some time to reach there. Maybe I show some of this with the presentation. I will now start. There is some problem for the file being loaded, but there is no need for me to go by that. So what I was telling, that there was a meter treaty, and this meter treaty went on defining units in terms of what was the best way to get the maximum accuracy. But attempt was to connect all units to fundamental constants. Fundamental constants like velocity of light are invariant. You can't change them. So this effort continued, and the one greatest problem, as I was telling you, was mass, which is a lump of platinum iridium, 1 kilogram, given by the International Bureau of Weights and Measures. So only recently, last May, on 20th May, every year is a meteorology day, because the Treaty of Meteorology was signed on this day. So treaty is that the government signs this thing. Even in India, the Ministry of External Affairs is a signatory. The maintenance is done by National Physical Laboratory, and Director NPL represents it. So this treaty now still has not all the world, because it is a lot of money is involved in it. So this treaty, 20th May last year, 2019, finally gave all the base units in terms of fundamental constant, and mass was replaced by a definition which uses Planck constant. Planck constant is a fundamental constant. You know already when we defined energy of a radiation, it is h times nu. H is Planck constant, nu is the frequency. So its value has been fixed 10 to the power minus 27 and so on. But I can't show you the presentation. So the value is fixed. Now this is one branch, but the question is it connected only to science and technology? This is not so. At one time, some 30, 40 years ago, and till about 30 years ago or 20 years ago, there was a great problem of trade, and this was related to measurements. In trade, if you export to US, then your goods or equipment or device has to be tested by their recognized laboratory, and you have to pay money. And this was not because we were a developing country. This was between Europe, US, it was Japan, Europe, and also Japan, US. So everybody was spending twice. And similarly, Europeans will not import from US till their goods are again verified in Europe. So WTO said that this is a great hindrance in trade. So this is one of the handicaps, that trade is not free. So this was a problem. So this is a commercial thing. Why I am saying it's not merely science only, but commercially. So WTO said, why do you people not make sure that whatever measurement quality related is done in one country, that is recognized by the other country? So then we decided that how do we do? All the members of Meter Treaty were thinking what to do. So then it was decided that each laboratory, each parameter, what we should do is we should buy common working together, including transferring standards in between, doing measurements on the same artifact, should recognize each other first. So this is not an agreement, we call it arrangement. This became a mutual recognition arrangement. Means all countries, but if you are part of this MRA, then you have to prove that not only your measurement capability, but also your management standards are like ISO standards. So we have to prepare laboratories which follow the same standard world over. So that way, then each laboratory continuously keeps on comparing their measurements, and this led to what we call MRA, Mutual Recognition Arrangement. India is also a member, and the entire data, how one compares, is with the International Bureau of Weights and Measures, their website at Paris. Unfortunately, I can't show you this, but this means that whatever you do, you are traceable to international standards, and anybody in the world can see how good you are. That is why we are doing this. Now, related with this measurements, trade, I have said, mutual recognition arrangement had, because we didn't want, the WTO did not want any barriers in trade, because this was considered one of the barriers. So the measurement system tried to remove that barrier. Now I come to more industrial uses. If we now, for example, go to any goods, any things, any material which is being sold or used in different departments. Take, for example, steel. Steel, you can use in very mundane applications. You can use for making windows, you can measure anything in construction, even if strengthening the construction in construction, but it is also used in most advanced applications. Similarly, aluminum, it is used very well in aerospace industry. Now that aluminum which you use in aerospace industry and that aluminum which is used in common utensils or making hangers or whatever, what is the difference between them? So there again, you needed standards to begin with. These documentary standards became a very, very important area. It is an independent, big area where you define standards for everything that you do. For example, now in front of KRMU, there is a highway being made, lot of steel, concrete, and other materials are being used. And it could be great risk if they don't use high quality materials conforming to standards for construction. So what, for example, I was saying, you can have a steel, this aluminum wire making hangers for clothes, or you can have a aluminum in a aircraft or in a spacecraft going to, let us say, Chandrayaan and so on. So basically, what is the difference? So for each application, after lot of efforts, a specification is defined. For this, there is a international standards organization to which India is also a member. And there we have now divided different fields. It is different fields in different categories. For example, today the topmost categories in microelectronics, in artificial, where artificial intelligence is also utilized, but information technology, graphics. This is now the maximum number of documentary standards now are at international level in this field. So right now, if you go by categories, unfortunately, I can't show you, in different areas, you have categories. And from these categories, you know for which purpose, which standard is needed. For example, take silicon, take the microelectronics industry or industry related with chips. So in chips, we can't use every, I'll come to characterization also, but we can't use any piece of silicon to make a chip. So for this, there are also documentary standards. For example, this standard will also tell, for example, you can take a chip of about 100 dia or 150 dia or 50 dia, you define that. But this diameter is not sufficient. Since it is a single crystal, you have to tell parallel to which atomic sheets your surface is there. So your surface is not arbitrarily cut. It should be parallel to a sheet of atoms, a specified sheet of atoms, and the angle between the sheet of atoms and surface is specified. And it is a very small angle. In fact, all laboratories can't measure it even. In fact, I can tell an anecdote. There is also a straight edge on these wafers, and this space edge has a specific angle. So when we were doing research, we had very advanced diffraction facilities. So I found that we can measure this angle better than anybody has done before. So my colleague, we said we will make a short note and send to a reputed journal in US, Review of Scientific Instrument. And when I send this short note that we have a new technique to measure the angle of the edge with the crystallographic plane, I got within a month, I got a very urgent call from the editors that we are very grateful, you have made a very good advancement, and we are working on a new standard, and this is a new technique. So they asked me to make a full paper, so we have to make a full paper. So what I want to show, not ourselves, I want to say they are continuously related with research in frontier areas. So silicon, for example, then if you put a flat wafer, which is very thin, about 0.2 to 0.3 mm, it will bend. It is a warpage. For example, this is one of the great problems, that if you put it in the air, some oxide layer comes, and because these are dissimilar materials, they try to they impact upon each other. The silicon oxide layer tends to shift the atoms so that their interatomic distance is the same as in oxide, not as in the vapor. So there is a small warpage or bending. For example, we could do techniques where a warpage of 35 kilometer or 40 kilometer can be measured. But this comes part of standardization. So right now, within US, within this ISO, the International Standards Organization, there are roughly 1 lakh specification. And whenever you have to do, in fact, when you want details, they charge money for this. So when you want a specification, then you get this. In addition, they have scientific bodies, ASTM, American Society for Testing of Materials. They also produce this. For example, when we started backing up at NPL, the industry 26 parameters were to be measured. This is only to illustrate, it is not merely for common, is very important for pressure cookers so that they don't explode. So ISI mark that is given. So in India, this responsibility is with Bureau of Indian Standards. They have also now several divisions, each types of engineering and so on. So each documentary standard from Indian point of view has also been, I have also served in some committees when they form, and I was part of the executive of this body. So there we have to make sure that safety of the people, the main requirement, long-term stability doesn't get affected by atmospheric conditions. The problem came, for example, I can now give, going a little bit further, if you go to WHO, they have their own standard. For example, for toxic elements in water, they have nearly 30 parameters. So if you want to say this water is potable, you have to give a specification. You have to tell, for example, a arsenic, mercury, and the 6 toxic elements, they have been specified to few parts in a billion. We had a problem in this. So therefore, how do you test it? So for this, we prepare what we call samples, reference samples, which are called certified reference materials, with a special national organization or a laboratory like NPL will certify that you take this 50 ml or so specimen, which is sealed. It will, if you measure by a standard method, you will get this much, plus minus so much. But this is not a simple exercise. For example, for toxic element in water, some things we did better than others. In this, the problem is which water you will use to make solution. It should itself should not be impure. So you can say take distilled water. Now, some students may be interested that when you have a distilled water, the distilled water you merely boil, take it to steam and condense the steam, you get distilled water. So distilled water, when it is boiled, it interacts very violently with the container, the flask in which you boil or so on. So this boiling takes some impurity from the container, the flask in which you are boiling. So then it came the question of sub-boiling. So you distill below the boiling point. So by this sub-boiling, you have to prepare. When you do this, you can go several orders of magnitude better in impurity. That is the reference. Then there was a question, if you take a container, if you put a standard solution in a container, the container can eat it. It interacts. We tried many, there was a lot of problems worldwide. It is not only us. For example, in one of these South American countries, they have the problem, they export a lot of fishes, and the fish had arsenic and some of these toxic elements. So they had a problem when they took the standard itself was not stable. So here at NPL, our team made it possible to stabilize that. For 6 months, we could guarantee you buy this for 6 months, this will be the value. But we had to also involve 30 laboratories. So what I am trying to give, standardization and measurement is not merely only concerned with physics or only concerned with chemistry. It has very wide spectrum, and it also impacts on economy, science, society, and so on. That was the reason why I was mentioning all this. Now, I have mentioned about WTO, I have mentioned about ISO, BIS, and so on. Now, within science, when you take something in the frontiers, you can take new problems. For example, today, some of the frontiers are very, very complicated. Some of the frontiers are, for example, now there is a stress whether we can go to quantum computers. Lot of work is being done. Is quantum computer? What is the basis of quantum computer? You have orbitals. If orbitals of two atoms are entangled, you have nearly infinite memory. Nearly, I'm saying. It's a very large memory. Computers are going to change. India also has started. I was part of the steering committee for this. So in this, the thing is, you must have a crystal on the surface of which you put one or two atoms and put them in such proximity that their orbitals will entangle with each other. So these are some of the areas which are very exciting, which need a lot of scientific activity, scientific work, and it will continue happening. It is continuing happening, and with this is now connected also artificial intelligence, machine language, and so on. So this is a broad spectrum of things. I told you characterization of material. Only 2-3 sentences before I close, I will say about characterization of materials. The question is, can you use any material for behavior understanding? What will be the property depend on? So this work of last 100 years or so has established, not only you should know the composition, what a material is composed of, you should know about impurities, whether you have added or which you can't avoid. I said unavoidable. Or structure, how atoms are organized, and also defects in structure. Defect means one sheet of atoms is missing, you can do. Lastly, I will show that while doing these techniques, because some students may be in the audience, you all know that refractive index of water is 1.3, glass is about 1.5 in visible light. But what most people don't know or realize that this depends upon the wavelength. And the most interesting thing comes when the wavelength comes to X-ray region, only 1 angstrom, for example, wavelength, or such a small wavelength, the refractive index of solid becomes less than 1. Solid can become, the air is dense, solid is rare. So in this case, you can have total reflection from the surfaces. So if you have total reflection, you can then by X-rays detect 1 or 2 layers which are avoidable, sometimes unavoidable. So this not only you can know their composition, you can know also their things. So these frontiers keeps on posing challenges. Science also helps in solving new problems. So on the whole, measurement science has impact on all spheres of activity. It is not merely science, technology, engineering, also in trade, commerce, and so on. Legal issues, I have not touched about it, there is also a big branch of legal metrology. If somebody cheats, there is a law, you can sue him. So we have Department of Weights and Measures in India, which takes care of the legal metrology, and they also do research in this. So characterization and standardization is key to. And more recently, now all the 7 base units, the mass, length, time, candela, and so on, are connected with the fundamental constant, and the last one being kilogram, which is now connected with Planck constant. With this, I thank you all for your attention. I'll be glad to answer if there are questions.
Thank you so much, Professor Krishnalal. It's a very enlightening, fascinating journey into the world of measurements. And as you said, measurement concerns not only those areas which we consider to be physical, but as you said, trade, commerce, legal studies, law, but we also find measurement in our everyday lives in terms of work. For example, performance is also being measured. And there are standards or certain systems to gauge people's performance on an everyday basis. In work as well.
Most difficult.
Most difficult. It's also a shifting or arbitrary nature of these systems to measure things that are not tangible, perhaps in that sense. But clearly, measurement or measurability is a fundamental or foundational aspect to all spheres of life. So long as we occupy space and time, it has to be measurable. There are a few questions. There's quite a few interesting questions. Some of them have been answered tangentially in your talk. Perhaps I'll begin with one question which you briefly touched upon just now, was if there is some dispute in the case of measurements, then is there a body, or how is the dispute to be resolved or treated if there's an argument or dispute in industry or trade or elsewhere regarding measurements? That's one question.
See, if there is a dispute, to begin with, you have to ask, is the dispute on the type of standard they are using? Because people may say, I am using ISO standard. I will say I am using BIS standard. If there is a dispute on that, we will see in which country, which one is valid. For example, in India, BIS is the custodian, and it also is part of the International Standards Organization. So first of all, the documentary standard. Secondly, when somebody has made a measurement, you have to make sure it is traceable to the national standard. The traceability comes if your own facility is calibrated either at NPL. I did not touch because of capacity of time. There is NABL, the National Accreditation Body. There are many, many calibration laboratories and testing laboratories. This chain of measurement must end at NPL. There must be unbroken chain connected to national, and NPL ensure this is connected to international. So if, for example, anybody measures in India, technically it can be connected with international standard. Now, when there is a dispute, you have to see which one of them is part of that unbroken chain. If one is not, then he will do so. And if not, then, for example, a third higher level laboratory can measure both the cases and come to a conclusion. That is the beauty of measurement. I hope this is all right. If there is a supplementary, I'll be glad.
There's another question which I know that I think there's an interesting answer to this is, have there been any recent changes in the definition of standards? Or is there another way of measuring certain standards now in place?
Yes, that is what I said. Now the base units have been redefined. So earlier, for example, at one time for mass, we were thinking Avogadro number will come there. In fact, I have also some work there. How to measure Avogadro number. There was a question whether we can go through silicon because it is very perfect material. If, for example, there is also a technique, you can measure at sheet by sheet of atoms in silicon and develop this thing. Now, for example, the Avogadro number as a fixed number now will define more the amount substance of the. Similarly, luminous intensity, all 7 base units are connected with the standard. And this, not only this, they have been interconnected. Earlier, there was no interconnection with sound. When you are measuring mole and your velocity of light, you felt there is no. Now, these have been interconnected. Unfortunately, in the presentation, I had diagrammatically this, but you should see the physics behind it, or the science behind it, or chemistry behind it. That will make it clear. So each fundamental constant is an invariant model. Like I said, velocity of light, or Avogadro's number, or Planck's constant. So they define the status at a given point. And that everybody has to conform. This is what.
That's very interesting.
I hope it is clear about it.
Yes. It's very clear. There is another question, since we're all at the moment concerned with the pandemic and COVID-19. There's one question regarding the graphene, which is this new, newly devised substance or material, you could say, with this very high tensile qualities. Do you think that one of the questions is, do you think graphene or graphene-based material can be used in some way to fight COVID-19 or dissolve it in some way? Can that be used in any medical sense?
Well, I may say a few words about graphene itself is a fantastic material, and carbon somehow is most fascinating. At the one end, you can see it's most common for energy coal. Then comes graphite. Then many, you participated in one of the experiments when we were having a spot welding for thermocouple. It has a fantastic way of doing things. First, people noted when they were doing mass spectrography about 2 decades ago, that there is one molecule which is the mass of 60 atoms of carbon. It became carbon 60. This became a molecule. This is fantastic. Then people start seeing the carbon nanotubes. So this would come into a tube. And more recently, this is also a Nobel Prize winning a work. Somebody, and with a very simple thing, is a depth of knowledge and analysis that makes a difference. He, from a graphite crystal, took a tape, this tape and normal cello tape which we use for sticking, and very simply they managed to show one sheet of carbon atoms together, and this is graphene. Now this has shown enormous amount of properties, detectors and so on. Now coming to COVID, if you see, I have not brought in a lot of crystallography today, though I wanted. The thing is, it is basically a protein. When you go to structure, we can work out how atoms are organized inside a protein. But it immediately covers itself with a fat. This is its amazing characteristics. It is a protein to begin with, covers with a fat, and because of the fat immediately interacts. So my own feeling is that these processes are worth investigating in great detail. Means very small energy differences. It comes around room temperature. Most of the time it is room temperature. There is also no evidence that enormous heat will destroy it. Right now there is no evidence. So if you think of graphene, at the best it can be used to make a layer of the COVID, what I say, protein plus covered with fat. But for challenge for scientists is to do precision measurements with very small energy differences. When you convert from protein to fat, the energy difference is very small. These processes themselves, if investigated in detail, will show some way, I think so. But as such directly right now, I'm not aware of any.
Yeah. Thank you. So shall we take one more question, or you can also
go ahead. I'll be happy.
This question is, it seems to be between artificial intelligence, AI, and the feeding of data into AI about measurements. Is there a possibility to feed AI or data concerning measurements into
It
AI?
is very, very important. I compliment the person who has asked this question. This is the frontier today. I have not talked about data science. I've been president of the International Body for Data Science for 4 years. My office was in Paris, and even now I'm connected. The problem there is that in data, there is a very big fight that all data should be open access. Even now there are many, even 2 days ago, I got a mail of some discussion meeting that the question is, the data, can it come in open system? This has been a lot of discussion. The reason is many people or companies which invest in developing new drugs, for example, they spend $1 or $2 billion. In between, they have to have lot of what we call proprietary data only they know, but they are not sharing. So this question remains there. When data becomes freely available, when data becomes little bit selectively. Now coming to artificial intelligence, the capability of doing, the capability to analyze and make complicated analysis by artificial intelligence has opened entirely new areas, Within India also, I know Niti Aayog is very much concerned. India is also trying, like quantum computation, also artificial intelligence, machine language. These are frontier areas where a lot of effort is going worldwide. It is not that somebody has more. True, even for the quantum computer now, even 3-4 places like Google has a system, IBM has a system, the university in USA. In Sydney, they demonstrated that they could entangle orbitals of 2 atoms. So these things are very exciting and happening. And this must excite a lot of young people to join these efforts to make valuable content. That was my...
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think we'll end there. We've been here now on live for about over 1 hour now. And thank you so much for this very stimulating...
Only thing is, one thing I suggest, if some people feel very strongly, they can send a mail, maybe at your address or my address.
So,
and that we can, because we want to encourage particularly younger people to go into depth of things, not superficial. That is what I...
I'm sure your talk has inspired all our students and younger viewers to think critically and to go into and to sort of adopt a scientific, the spirit of scientific inquiry, the true spirit of scientific inquiry in whatever they're doing, whatever field they are interested in and inspired by. We are all certainly very inspired by your presence and your great wisdom and knowledge. And once again, it's a privilege to have you as part of the faculty and your mentoring of all our young students, for which we, again, thank you. And thank you to all the viewers this morning for being on the call. Apologies for slight technical hitches that we had today. We look forward to having you again in our continuing webinar series. And thank you so much again, Professor Krishnalal ji.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.